Welcome to Something About Sleep. We hope you'll let our stories guide you to a nice, peaceful slumber as you learn about history and what it was like to be a human in times long since past. Now, I need to get to sleep, and if you're watching this video, chances are you do too. So, without further ado, take it away.
Before the first pale light reaches the rooftops, there is a moment when the canal seems to be holding its breath. The water is almost the same colour as the sky. A lantern hangs low near the stern of a wooden boat, its flame growing faint as the night begins to loosen its grip. Somewhere beyond the mist, a pole touches the canal bed with a muted knock. A rope slides gently across damp planks. Then another boat passes in the grey half-light, close enough for you to hear the water part around its hull, but distant enough that the people aboard remain little more than silhouettes. It is easy, in a quiet moment like this, to forget how far the water reaches. The narrow channel beside us is not simply a local river, and not a single trench cut across the land at one moment in history. It is part of a much larger and older network, a waterway assembled, repaired, redirected, widened, and cared for across many centuries. At different times its branches have linked fertile southern fields with northern cities, small landing places with busy warehouses, village markets with imperial granaries, and one human life with thousands of others moving patiently along the same watery road. Tonight, we will take an unhurried northbound journey along Imperial China's Grand Canal. We will begin near Hangzhou, where mist settles over the water and tiled roofs gather along the banks. We will drift through the green waterways of Jiangnan, pass under stone bridges in Suzhou, linger among the warehouses and evening lamps of Yangzhou, and follow the slow work of grain, water gates, dikes, towpaths, clerks, cooks, boatmen, and travellers. Farther north, the landscape will open beneath a wider sky. Eventually, near the end of our journey, we will arrive at Hangzhou, the canal terminal east of Beijing, where the cargo of one boat becomes part of another chain of movement. This will not be the story of a single documented voyage. Too many things change from dynasty to dynasty, from town to town, and from season to season for one imagined trip to contain them all. Instead, we will follow a historically grounded composite journey, set mainly in the late Imperial Canal world shaped by the Ming and Qing periods, while occasionally looking back to the earlier centuries that created the route beneath us. And along the way, we might notice something easily overlooked. Great historical systems are often remembered in large terms: dynasties, capitals, engineering works, tax systems, and trade routes. Yet they were sustained through small repeated actions. Someone checked a rope before dawn. Someone measured grain into a basket. Someone opened a wooden gate and watched the water rise. Someone cooked rice on a modest stove while the boat waited in the shade of a bridge. Someone folded a blanket at night, knowing that the canal would still be there in the morning. Perhaps that is the quiet mystery of the Grand Canal. It stretched across an extraordinary distance, yet it was made real each day through ordinary routines. As you settle in, feel free to leave a comment sharing where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. And if these slow journeys through history help you relax, you're warmly invited to like the video and subscribe for more calm stories from the past. For now, there is nowhere we need to hurry. The lantern is dimming. The boat is ready. The first soft colour of morning is spreading over the water, and our journey begins. The boat moves almost imperceptibly at first. A pole presses against the bottom of the canal. The hull shifts away from the bank, and a row of ripples widens behind us. Along the shore, reeds lean slightly in the morning air. Old stones appear just above the waterline, softened by moss and long exposure to damp weather. They seem settled and permanent, but the water beside them has never been entirely still. The Grand Canal is sometimes described as though it were one immense construction project, planned in a single age and completed according to a single design. The reality is gentler and more complicated. It is a system of waterways accumulated over time. Some sections began as local channels, others joined rivers, lakes, and older canals. Some were dredged, straightened, repaired, or abandoned when conditions changed. The waterway that later travellers knew was the result of repeated decisions made by many generations. The oldest parts of the larger network reach back to the centuries before China was unified under its first imperial dynasty. In the 5th century BCE, and around that broad period, regional states in eastern China were already cutting channels through the landscape. Waterways could help move supplies, connect settlements, and provide routes through country that was often easier to cross by boat than by cart. These early channels were not yet the Grand Canal in the later sense. They were pieces of a future network whose full shape no one could have seen. Centuries passed. Capitals moved. Borders changed. River courses shifted. The needs of rulers and towns changed with them. During the Sui dynasty, in the early 7th century CE, the idea of a more unified canal network became especially important. Existing waterways were connected and expanded so that communication and transport could flow more effectively across a wide imperial landscape. The Sui dynasty itself was brief, and the labour demanded by its great works could be severe. Yet the waterway connections created and strengthened in that period endured far beyond the dynasty that ordered them. It may help to think of the canal not as one line but as a long conversation between human planning and natural geography. The larger system interacted with several important river basins, including those of the Yangtze and the Yellow River. It crossed landscapes of different heights, soils, climates, and seasonal patterns. A useful channel in one century might silt up in another. A river might alter its path. A dike might need rebuilding after years of wear. A town that once sat beside a busy route might find itself on a quieter branch after a new connection was made elsewhere. As the boat travels north, these layers are not always obvious. A traveller does not see a dynasty floating on the water. What you see is an embankment repaired with earth and stone. You see a gate with dark wooden timbers. You see a narrow side channel leaving the main route and disappearing between fields. You see houses gathered around a landing place because boats have been stopping there for longer than anyone in the village can remember. The canal reached another major turning point under the Yuan dynasty in the 13th century. With the capital established at Dadu, the city now known as Beijing, new work made the north-south route more direct. The Grand Canal reached a major peak as a unified inland navigation network, with more than 2,000 kilometres of artificial waterways linking 5 important river basins. The resulting system was never effortless. It required constant attention, but it made possible a remarkable scale of movement between regions that produced grain and regions that depended on regular supply. In later Ming and Qing times, the canal continued to matter not only as a route, but also as an organised world of labour and administration. Grain could move northward toward the capital through an elaborate system of collection, storage, inspection, transport, and distribution. Salt and other regulated goods also belong to the canal's history. Private merchants, local farmers, artisans, cooks, porters, ferry passengers, and families aboard smaller boats occupied the same waters in countless everyday ways. The boat passes beneath a low bridge. For a few seconds, the morning light narrows to a cool shadow. Sound changes under the stone arch. The gentle tapping of water against wood seems closer. Then the boat emerges, and the sky opens again. On one bank, a man bends to untangle a line near a small mooring post. On the other, a narrow path runs alongside the canal, worn into the earth by feet, animals, and the repeated passage of work. Farther ahead, smoke rises from a cluster of roofs. It would be easy to search for a single beginning to the Grand Canal. But the more fitting image may be the water itself. A long route does not hold one age apart from the others. It carries traces forward. A channel first cut for one purpose may later serve another. A bridge is rebuilt. A wharf is enlarged. A gate is replaced. A town adjusts to traffic. The visible surface remains calm while history accumulates quietly along the banks. By now the mist is lifting. The canal has taken on a muted silver colour, and the outlines of the southern landscape are becoming clearer. Ahead lies Hangzhou, or rather the working edges of the city as they might have appeared from the water. Not a grand panorama, but a sequence of small scenes unfolding one after another. A shutter opens above a waterside lane. A ceramic jar is set down on a step. A basket is carried toward a boat. The day is beginning. As the light strengthens, Hangzhou gathers slowly around the canal. At first, there are only a few walls reflected in the water. Pale plaster, dark roof tiles, wooden shutters still closed against the early chill. Then the banks become more active. Stone steps descend into the canal at irregular intervals. Narrow side channels slip between buildings. Small boats rest close to the shore, their bows nudging the edge of a landing. The smell of cooking rice reaches the water before many voices do. Hangzhou occupies a special place in the geography of the Grand Canal. Near the southern end of the Beijing-Hangzhou route, the city was connected not only to the canal, but also to the broader waterways and productive landscapes of Zhejiang and the lower Yangtze region. Across long periods of history, this southern world mattered deeply because of what it could grow, make, store, and send onward. But from the deck of a modest working boat, the significance of the city arrives in pieces. A woman rinses a wooden bowl at the edge of a step, then lifts it away before our wake reaches the stone. A shopkeeper pushes open folding shutters and sweeps yesterday's dust toward the lane. Two men balance a pole between their shoulders with baskets hanging from either side. Nearby, a child watches as a length of rope is coiled carefully beside a stack of jars. There is nothing ceremonial about the scene. It is simply a waterside neighbourhood becoming awake. Our boat carries an ordinary mixture of goods. Few sacks are secured beneath woven coverings. There are baskets, ceramic containers, cloth bundles, and tools tucked into places where they will not shift too easily. The cargo is not large enough to attract attention at a busy dock, but it must still be arranged carefully. On a working boat, balance matters, space matters. The ease with which someone can reach a rope or move toward the stern matters. Another boat draws alongside for a moment. Its operator lifts one hand in greeting, speaks briefly to someone near our bow, and lets the distance widen again. Beyond him, a larger vessel is being loaded. Porters move with practiced rhythm between a landing and the deck. One bends under the weight of a sack, takes several measured steps, then lowers it onto a growing row while another worker makes room. The canal does not need to be loud to feel busy. Much of its energy is contained in small sounds. A basket touching stone, a pole knocking once against wood, sandals on damp steps, The scrape of a jar shifted into place, a voice calling from a doorway, the soft hiss of a lid lifted from a cooking pot. As we continue northward, the city reveals how naturally life can orient itself toward water. On land, a street leads you from one building to another. On the canal, movement follows a reflective corridor. Houses, workshops, docks and lanes approach gradually and slide away behind the stern. You do not enter each neighbourhood. You receive a passing glimpse of it, like a page turned slowly. A stone bridge appears ahead, rising gently above the water. Its arch is high enough for ordinary boats to pass beneath, though the crew still glances upward as we approach. On the top of the bridge, morning foot traffic has begun. A figure pauses beside the parapet and looks down. For a moment, the person above and the boat below occupy the same little crossing of space. Then the bridge shadow passes over the deck, and the canal opens once more. Bridges are among the most memorable features of canal towns, but they are more than scenic ornaments. They carry lanes over the water, connect one bank to another, guide foot traffic toward markets, and shape the daily negotiation between people moving by land and people moving by boat. Some bridges are broad and well-travelled. Others are modest, almost private, linking a pair of quiet lanes. Together they help create the feeling that the waterway is woven into the city rather than simply passing beside it. The southern morning is still cool enough for mist to linger near the surface. Reflections tremble with every passing hull. White walls appear in the water as broken bands of light. Dark roofs become wavering shapes. Laundry hung under an overhang barely stirs. A boat loaded with greens moves in the opposite direction, its baskets giving off the fresh smell of leaves and damp soil. The fertile south supported a wide range of goods and livelihoods. Grain mattered greatly to the long history of the canal, especially because shipments moving north could help supply administrative centres, military needs, and large urban populations. Yet the life of the canal cannot be reduced to grain alone. The same waterways carried local produce, cloth, ceramics, fuel, tools, building materials, personal belongings, letters, and travellers. A small boat entering Hangzhou might be completing a journey of only a few miles. Another vessel might be beginning a much longer passage through several regions. Near a landing, a vendor ladles something warm into bowls. The steam rises briefly, then disappears in the moving air. Our own breakfast is simple. A small pot has been set over a modest stove in a protected part of the boat. Tea leaves darken the hot water. Rice porridge is divided into bowls. No one rushes. The boat keeps moving while the morning meal is eaten in small pauses between ordinary tasks. The city begins to thin by degrees rather than ending all at once. Warehouses give way to smaller buildings. Small buildings give way to gardens, cultivated plots, and occasional clusters of homes. The banks become greener. The distance between bridges grows longer. A water gate sits at the edge of a side channel, its timbers dark with moisture. Beyond it, a narrower route leads toward fields and villages not visible from the main canal. There is a particular calm in departing by water. Roads often suggest effort, footsteps, wheels, dust, slopes, and the constant awareness of the ground beneath you. A boat offers a different sense of distance. The landscape comes to you. A willow appears, bends toward the canal and drifts behind. A roof emerges through the mist and grows small again. A conversation on the bank reaches you for a moment, then becomes indistinct. The people along the canal are not performing a scene for passing travellers. They are washing, carrying, opening, sorting, waiting, and beginning the day. The canal is useful because it belongs to these repeated actions. Its historical scale may be immense, but its presence here is intimate. It reaches the kitchen step. It reaches the workshop door. It reaches the hands that knot a line around a worn wooden post. By late morning, the denser edges of Hangzhou are behind us. The roof line breaks apart into smaller settlements. Green plots open beyond the bank. Waterbirds lift from the reeds, settle farther away, and resume their stillness. The sky has brightened, though a veil of cloud keeps the light soft. A crew member checks the covering over the sacks and tightens one rope. Another pours the last of the tea. The boat finds a steady pace. Ahead lies Jiangnan, the watery country south of the lower Yangtze, where canals, fields, towpaths, villages, and market towns seem to enter one another without a sharp boundary. Before looking outward again, however, it is worth becoming familiar with the small floating room carrying us north. A working boat teaches its passengers to notice space. On land, a bowl can be placed on a table and forgotten for a while. A jacket can be left over a chair. A bundle can rest near the wall until someone needs it. On a boat, every object shares the movement of the water. It must have a place. It must not roll underfoot or block the narrow passage between cargo and deck. A rope must be ready when the bank approaches. A pole must be easy to lift. A pot must sit where a passing wake will not send its contents spilling. The boat carrying us north is not a grand vessel. It is not decorated for an official procession or prepared for leisurely sightseeing. Its planks are worn smooth in the places where hands and feet have touched them most often. The roofed section offers shelter for cargo and for rest. The open deck provides room to work. Woven coverings can be pulled into place when weather changes. Near the stern, the person steering watches the bank, the water, and the traffic ahead with the unhurried attention of someone accustomed to making many small adjustments. Canal boats varied greatly according to region, cargo, period, and purpose. Some belonged to official grain transport. Some served merchants. Some carried passengers or local goods. Some were homes as well as workplaces. To imagine one modest vessel is not to claim that every boat looked the same. It is simply to enter the practical world shared by many people whose days unfolded close to the water. The cargo occupies the centre of that world. Sacks are stacked low enough to remain stable. Baskets fit into spaces beside them. Ceramic jars are padded or wedged where they will be less likely to knock together. Cloth bundles are kept dry. Tools are placed along one side. A wooden pole, a scoop, spare line, perhaps a mallet, a hook, and the ordinary items required to repair a small problem before it becomes a delay. Near the covered part of the deck, a compact stove allows simple meals. Rice, porridge, vegetables, tea, and soup do not require elaborate preparation. The smell of breakfast remains in the air for a while after the bowls have been rinsed. Later, when the sun is higher, another pot may simmer quietly, while the boat waits near a landing or moves through a calm section of canal. Bedding is rolled away during the day. A folded jacket rests beside a basket. Personal belongings remain modest, contained in boxes or bundles. The boat offers little room for unnecessary possessions, but it does not feel empty. It feels shaped by use. The people aboard also settle into a rhythm. One watches for shallow edges near the bank. Another checks the rope when a stop approaches. Someone shifts a basket away from a damp patch. Someone looks ahead to judge whether two boats can pass comfortably under the next bridge. Instructions are brief because many actions are familiar. Silence is not awkward. It belongs to the work. The usefulness of water transport becomes clear when you look at the cargo and imagine moving it overland. A single basket can be carried along a road. A sack can be loaded onto an animal or cart. But heavy and bulky goods accumulate quickly. Roads can be muddy, uneven, crowded, or indirect. A boat may move slowly, yet once afloat it can carry a significant load, with a steadiness difficult to match on land. The canal is valuable not because it eliminates effort, but because it organises effort differently. At intervals the pace changes. In an open stretch a light breeze may help. Near a bank a pole may press against the canal bed. Along some sections, towpaths allow boats to be pulled from shore. Oars and human strength still matter. Local knowledge matters. Water depth, wind, current, traffic, gate schedules, bridge height, and weather all shape the day's progress. A larger boat approaches from ahead. Our crew exchanges a few words with its boatmen. The vessels slow slightly and pass with care. Water moves between the two hulls, lifting us almost imperceptibly before settling again. The larger vessel carries covered cargo. A kettle sits near its stern. Laundry hangs beneath a sheltered edge. A small dog raises its head, looks across the gap, and lies down again. The moment is ordinary, yet it reveals something about the canal. Travel here is not solitary. Even when the banks are quiet, the route is shared. Boats pass, wait, moor, overtake, and separate. People learn to read one another's movement. A turn of the bow, a call from the bank, a lifted pole, or a rope already in hand can communicate what is about to happen. The boat also has a daily relationship with weather. A clear morning allows coverings to be folded back where air can move through the sheltered space. A threat of rain changes the arrangement almost immediately. Cloth and woven matting are drawn more securely over goods that must remain dry. Ceramic jars are checked where they rest against one another. Loose items are placed where a sudden wake or gust will not send them across the deck. The crew does not treat these adjustments as interruptions. They are part of the same routine as steering. Sunlight changes the vessel as well. At mid-morning, one side of the roof shelter grows warm while the shaded side remains cool. A bowl set near the edge catches the light. Rope fibres appear paler where they have dried. Damp planks release a faint earthy smell. A person resting for a few minutes chooses the side of the boat where the air moves most comfortably and shifts again when the sun reaches it. The canal is slow enough that observation becomes a form of work. The person at the stern notices the wake of an approaching vessel before it reaches us. Someone near the bow watches the colour of the water close to shore, looking for signs of shallower ground. A bridge ahead is judged not only by its arch, but also by the traffic approaching from the other direction. If another boat is nearer, there is no harm in yielding space and waiting. On some working boats, family life and labour might overlap. A child could learn early which ropes not to step across and where to sit when a landing became busy. An older relative might prepare food, sort small items, mend cloth, or keep watch over belongings while others handled the boat. A hired hand might join the crew for a particular journey. A passenger might occupy only a corner of the shared space, careful not to interfere with the routines already established aboard. The exact arrangement varied widely, but the boat's limited dimensions encouraged attentiveness to one another. Even privacy takes a different form on the water. There are no spare rooms. Rest is found in timing. A moment alone near the bow before others wake, a cup of tea taken quietly after cargo is secured, a few minutes under the shelter while rain passes, a long look at the bank when conversation has ended. The boat does not offer solitude in the way an empty house might. It offers the softer solitude of shared work performed without constant speech. Maintenance continues in similarly modest ways. A small leak cannot be ignored simply because it is not yet serious. A loose board must be watched. A line weakened by rubbing against stone is turned, shortened, or replaced. A cooking pot is cleaned before the next meal. A wooden scoop is returned to the same place each time, so no one has to search for it when needed. The vessel remains dependable because problems are noticed while they are still small. By midday, the boat has become familiar enough that its sounds begin to recede into the background. The creak of wood no longer interrupts thought. The light knock of the hull against a small wake feels almost reassuring. The smell of damp rope, tea, and warm grain belongs to the day. We stop briefly at a modest landing where the bank rises just enough to provide a dry place to stand. One crew member steps ashore to ask a question and purchase a small bundle of vegetables. Another examines a line where several fibres have frayed. The repair is simple. The damaged section is cut away. The line is retied. Nothing about the pause is memorable to anyone involved, which is precisely why it matters. A long route is made possible by countless small corrections. From the landing, the canal looks slightly different. The boat that seemed like an entire floating world now seems compact. Its cargo sits beneath coverings. Its roofed shelter offers only a little shade. Its planks bear scratches and darkened areas where rain has soaked in and dried again. Yet it contains everything needed for the next stage: food, work, rest, and the means to continue. We step aboard once more. The rope is lifted from the post. The stern moves away from the bank. As the afternoon begins, attention drifts outward. The canal widens. The city is gone. Trees lean closer to the water. Beyond them, cultivated fields spread into the soft distance. Narrow paths accompany the boat, sometimes disappearing behind reeds or small buildings, then reappearing farther on. The vessel has become a quiet, moving room, and the waterways of Jiangnan are opening around it. Jiangnan is not a single view. It unfolds by layers. For a while the canal runs beside fields divided into careful plots. The water reflects a low green bank, then a row of trees, then the corner of a tiled roof. A narrow path keeps pace with us from the shore. In one place it is broad enough for two people to walk side by side. In another it thins between reeds and the edge of a vegetable garden. Farther on, it bends behind a cluster of houses and returns near a stone landing darkened by years of damp weather. The word Jiangnan broadly refers to the country south of the lower Yangtze. Across many centuries, the region became known for fertile land, dense waterways, towns, agriculture, crafts, and trade. It is tempting to describe the landscape only in terms of beauty, and there is certainly a soft beauty here. Willow leaves touch the water. White walls brighten beneath a cloudy sky. Small bridges make gentle arcs over side channels. Yet the peaceful appearance is inseparable from daily work. Near the bank, someone stands ankle-deep in a field, bending methodically from one task to the next. A short distance away, baskets have been set beneath a tree while two people rest in the shade. The canal brings the smell of wet soil, leaves, and cooking smoke, together in the same moving air. Nothing remains in view for long. Each scene approaches, becomes briefly clear, and falls behind. A woman carrying vegetables reaches the towpath just before our boat does. She shifts the basket on her arm and waits as a smaller vessel noses toward the landing. The boatman steadies it with a pole. A few words pass between shore and water. The basket changes hands. The boat turns into a side canal barely wide enough to contain its reflection, and slips between the houses. These side channels are part of the character of Jiangnan. The main canal may carry travellers and cargo over long distances, but smaller waterways reach more intimate places. They enter villages, run beside fields, connect ponds and markets, and lead to landings where a handful of baskets matter more than the great movements of imperial supply. From the deck, each narrow opening suggests another network beyond our view. The towpath remains with us. Depending on conditions, a vessel might move by pole, oar, sail, current, or the steady pull of people or animals from shore. No single method belongs to every stretch of the canal. The practical choice changes with the depth of the water, the wind, the weight aboard, the shape of the bank, and the traffic ahead. On a calm afternoon, we see a line drawn taut from a boat to the path. The person walking beside it leans forward slightly, not with haste, but with the measured effort of a task repeated many times. The boat being pulled is loaded low in the water. Its covered cargo does not reveal itself. A second person stands aboard with a long pole, guiding the hull away from reeds and shallow edges. Their progress is slow enough that we pass them gradually. For several minutes the two boats move within sight of one another. Then a bend in the canal carries us ahead. The landscape is cultivated but not uniform. A grove of mulberry trees appears beyond a field. Elsewhere, a small plot holds greens in tidy rows. Ducks gather near a bank, disturbed only briefly by the passing hull. A farmer pauses on a narrow footbridge and watches the wake spread toward the reeds. In the distance, the pale walls of a village rise behind low trees. We moor near a quiet landing for a midday meal. The stop is simple. A rope loops over a wooden post. The hull settles against the bank with a soft, irregular knock. The shade of an overhanging tree falls across part of the deck. Rice is served with vegetables and a little broth. Tea is poured. For a few minutes the work of travel reduces itself to eating slowly and watching the water. Traffic continues without us. A family boat passes with bedding folded beneath its shelter. A fisherman returns along a side channel, his net arranged in a damp heap. Two narrow craft cross in opposite directions without difficulty. Beyond the landing, someone washes tools in the canal, lifting each one into the light before placing it on the stone to dry. Rural life along waterways was not effortless. Fields required attention, boats required maintenance. Floods, droughts, silting, taxes, and seasonal pressures could shape the lives of people who lived close to the water. Yet a restful journey need not ignore work in order to remain gentle. There is a calm honesty in observing the tasks themselves, the washing of a hoe, the mending of a net, the shifting of a basket, the waiting for a boat to clear a bridge. After the meal the line is untied and coiled. The canal receives us again. As the afternoon goes on, settlements become more frequent. Houses gather closer to the water. At one village, the lower level of a building opens almost directly onto a landing. A shop occupies the front room, while the upper windows belong to domestic life. A wooden signboard hangs above the lane, though from the canal we cannot read it. Beneath an awning, a shopkeeper sorts goods into shallow baskets. Across the channel, someone shakes a cloth and hangs it where the air can reach it. As the afternoon continues, we pass a village where the canal edge functions almost like a shared courtyard. Several households open toward the same stretch of water. One family has placed vegetables on a mat beneath the eaves. Another has left a narrow wooden stool near the steps. A pair of buckets rests beside a door, close enough to fill without carrying them through the lane. A grandmother sits in the shade sorting leaves into a shallow basket, while a younger person rinses cloth at the landing. The canal joins private and public life without making either one disappear. A doorstep can remain domestic even when boats pass only a few feet away. A landing can serve the household in the morning, a vendor in the afternoon, and a visiting relative by evening. Children learn to step carefully near wet stone. People recognize familiar hulls by shape and sound before the passengers become visible. At another bend, a boat arrives with fuel and household goods. It does not carry enough to transform the market, but several residents come down to meet it. Items are handed ashore one at a time: a bundle of kindling, a jar, a wrapped parcel, a replacement tool, a basket that returns empty after its contents have been delivered. The exchange lasts only a few minutes before the boat continues into a side channel. These small movements are easy to miss beside the grand scale of imperial transport, yet they reveal why waterways mattered so deeply. The canal was not only a long corridor between distant regions, it was also a local street. It served the short trip as naturally as the long one. The water towns of the lower Yangtze region developed in close relationship with rivers and canals. Streets and lanes often followed the water. Homes, workshops, bridges and landings met at close quarters. The result was not a frozen picture of perfect harmony. It was a practical arrangement shaped by geography. Water was a route, a workplace, a boundary, a reflection, and a part of domestic routine. A light rain begins so gently that it is first visible only on the surface. Small circles appear beside the hull. The boat roof darkens. Someone pulls a covering more securely over the cargo. The towpath becomes richer in colour as the earth absorbs the rain. Willow branches lower slightly under the added weight of droplets. Under a bridge, several people wait for the shower to pass. Their conversation echoes faintly from the stone. A child reaches one hand beyond the shelter and watches the rain collect on the fingertips. Our boat glides beneath the arch and out again, carrying the cool smell of wet masonry for a few moments. The rain does not last long. Clouds remain, keeping the afternoon muted. The canal widens near a small market landing where baskets of greens, bundles of reeds, jars and folded cloth sit beneath improvised coverings. There is no need to stop. We move past at a distance, close enough to hear voices and the occasional clink of ceramic, far enough that the market becomes part of the general hum of the landscape. By late afternoon, there are more bridges ahead. Some are narrow and steep, others carry busier lanes. Walls stand closer to the canal, and the spaces between buildings deepen into shadow. The rural stretches have not vanished completely, but they now alternate with denser neighbourhoods and more frequent traffic. The quiet agricultural rhythm is merging with an urban one. Suzhou lies ahead. The approach to Suzhou is marked not by a single entrance, but by a gradual gathering of detail. The banks become more defined. Stone replaces earth along longer sections of the water. Landing steps appear more often. The canal reflects walls, windows, narrow lanes and overhanging roofs. Boats wait near the shore while other vessels pass through the middle of the channel. Above us, foot traffic crosses one bridge after another. Suzhou is a useful place to understand how deeply water could enter the structure of a city. The wider Grand Canal corridor connected the city to other regions, while smaller urban waterways reached into neighbourhoods where daily work unfolded beside the water. In a canal city, the line between street and shore is thin. A boat arrives at the same place where a customer steps down from a lane. A workshop opens toward a landing. A bridge carries people above cargo moving silently below. The first bridge we pass beneath is made of stone worn smooth near its lower edges. Our crew glances upward as the arch closes around the boat. Voices from above become briefly clearer, then blur as we move into shadow. Water sounds different here. The soft slap against the hull returns from the masonry in small echoes. On the far side, light touches the deck again. A narrow lane runs along the bank. Its paving is damp from the earlier rain. A porter places a cloth-wrapped bundle onto a landing and waits for the boat that will collect it. 2 doors away, a carpenter works near an open shutter. We do not see the full shape of the object on his bench, only the repeated movement of his hand, and hear a patient tapping that follows us for several yards. Farther on, fabric hangs beneath the edge of a roof, where it can dry without blocking the lane. In another workshop, baskets are stacked against a wall. The most convincing portrait of an old city is not an inventory of famous products. It is a sequence of ordinary surfaces, fibres, wood shavings, dye-darkened water, folded cloth, teacups, wet stone, and the shine of a pole lifted from the canal. The waterway is busier here, but the pace remains controlled. A small boat loaded with firewood gives way to a passenger craft. A vendor waits at a landing while a larger vessel turns carefully through the available space. The boatmen understand that a crowded channel rewards patience. Sudden movement would only create more work. A bridge rises ahead with the lane descending toward the canal on either side. At the top, people pause before continuing into the opposite neighbourhood. One person carries a covered basket. Another leads a small animal over the stones. A third leans against the parapet, watching the boats pass below, as though there is no better place to spend a quiet minute. Bridges are functional pieces of the city, yet they also shape its mood. They divide a stretch of water into changing rooms of shade and light. They create viewpoints. They compress sound. They turn an ordinary passage into a succession of thresholds. To travel through Suzhou by boat is to experience the city arch by arch. Near midday, the clouds thin unexpectedly. Sunlight reaches the roof tiles and breaks across the canal in bright fragments. For a brief time, the water loses its grey-green softness and becomes almost dazzling. A row of jars on a step cast sharp shadows. The white walls appear warmer. Damp stone begins to dry. The light reveals the working marks that a softer day can hide. Steps are darkened at the level where water often reaches. A wall has been patched. Rope fibres have rubbed a groove into the edge of a post. The landing of a busy workshop bears scratches from baskets and cargo. The city is elegant in places, but it is not delicate. It has been used. At a market landing, the boat slows. Goods have been set in careful grouping so that people can pass along the narrow edge without stepping over them. There are vegetables, jars, bundles, wooden items, and folded lengths of fabric. A cook tends a small pot beneath an awning. Steam escapes each time the lid is lifted. Someone purchases a bowl and eats while standing near the water, making room whenever a porter comes through. Our own boat needs only a minor provision. A crew member steps ashore, returns with tea and a wrapped parcel of food, and places both beneath the shelter. The pause allows us to watch the channel more closely. A boat enters from a narrower side canal. Its operator uses a pole against the wall to guide the bow through the turn. The movement is careful and almost slow enough to stop. Once aligned with the main waterway, the boat glides forward and joins the flow. Cities connected by canals exchanged more than cargo. Goods carried with them habits, techniques, tastes, stories, songs, rumours, and news. A boatman hearing a phrase in one town might recognise a different rhythm of speech. A merchant might return with a fabric pattern, a tool, or an idea seen farther along the route. A cook might adapt a flavour encountered while travelling. The waterway made distance tangible, but it also made distance permeable. Still, from the deck, cultural exchange rarely announces itself in grand terms. It appears as a repaired basket made in a slightly unfamiliar style. It appears in the accent of a traveller asking for directions. It appears in the folded cloth delivered to a waterside shop and the paper parcel carried away from a food stall. The boat resumes its movement through the city. A woman on a stone step washes a cloth and twists the water from it. Above her a shutter opens. A teacup is placed on a windowsill. The smell of wood smoke mixes with the clean scent left by the rain. We enter a narrower passage where the walls rise close on either side. The day feels suddenly private. The city is no longer a broad collection of roofs, but a sequence of small domestic glimpses. A broom rests against a doorway. A cat sleeps under a bench. Someone turns pages in a room set back from the water. The canal carries us past without disturbing any of it. Then the water widens again. A longer bridge spans the channel. Beyond it, the city begins to loosen its hold. Workshops become fewer. Gaps appear between buildings. The air moves more freely. The density of stone landings gives way by degrees to greener banks and managed stretches of water. Behind us, Suzhou continues with its foot traffic, market voices, workshop taps, and boats moving patiently beneath the arches. Ahead, the canal grows quieter. It is time to notice the less visible work that allows a waterway to remain a road. A canal can look effortless when the surface is calm. From the deck, the water simply receives the boat and carries its reflection. Reeds tremble at the edge. A bridge shadow passes over the bow. The bank drifts by. Yet the Grand Canal could not remain useful through scenery alone. Beneath every peaceful journey lies an ongoing practice of observation, repair, and adjustment. In the afternoon, we approach a managed stretch of water where the boat must wait. A gate stands ahead between stone edges, its wooden surfaces darkened by moisture. Several vessels have already gathered at a respectful distance. Their crews speak quietly. Poles rest on the decks. Ropes are ready but not yet needed. Waiting is part of canal travel. It does not feel like a failure to move. It is simply one of the waterway's rhythms. The canal network crossed a varied landscape. Rivers and lakes fed it. Seasonal water levels altered it. Silt gathered. Banks softened. Channels required clearing. Different sections faced different problems. The Yellow River in particular changed course repeatedly across history, complicating navigation and the wider hydraulic environment. Other stretches needed water to be held, redirected, or released with care. UNESCO's description of the Grand Canal emphasizes not only channels, but also dikes, weirs, bridges, hydraulic facilities, and techniques adapted to local circumstances. Stone, rammed earth, clay, straw, timber, and other materials could all belong to the practical world of water management. No single structure explains the canal. Its durability came from combinations, gates and embankments, feeder waters and dredging, local skill and administrative attention. A worker walks along the top of the bank beside the gate. He pauses, looks down at the waterline and speaks to someone below. Near the stone wall, another man uses a long-handled tool to clear debris gathered against an edge. The actions are small, yet small obstructions matter when repeated across a network of waterways. The gate begins to move, timber creaks, water shifts through the opening with a deeper sound than the gentle surface noise we've heard all day. The change is not violent. It is steady. Ripples cross one another, touch the wall, return, and settle into a new pattern. Locks and gates serve different purposes in different places and periods. Some help manage the level of water, some assist boats through changes in elevation or flow, some help protect a channel or organize movement. It is better to imagine the system as a vocabulary of solutions than as one device repeated without variation from Hangzhou to Beijing. Our boat enters the shaded space near the wall. The air feels cooler. Moss darkens the stones near the water. Drips fall from the timbers at irregular intervals. The crew keeps the boat steady with light touches of a pole and line. For several minutes the journey narrows to the dimensions of the gate. Wood, stone, shadow, water, and the quiet attention of people who know what to watch. When the level and conditions allow, the way ahead opens. One boat moves first, then another. Our turn arrives without urgency. Beyond the gate, work continues along the bank. A damaged area of embankment has been opened for repair. Earth is being placed and compacted. Woven material lies nearby. Stonework at the lower edge shows newer patches beside older ones. The canal's long history is written partly in these repairs. A bank is not ancient simply because no one touches it. It survives because people do touch it. Dredging belongs to the same quiet labour. Silt accumulates where moving water slows and where rivers leave sediment behind. If channels grow too shallow, loaded boats struggle. Clearing the bed is not glamorous work, but it shapes the everyday usefulness of the route. A traveller may notice only that the boat continues forward. The effort required to make continuation possible remains mostly unseen. A bridge farther along has its own signs of maintenance. One edge has been strengthened. The towpath beneath it narrows, then widens again beyond the arch. A small stack of stone waits near the bank for the next repair. Workers sit in the shade to drink tea before returning to their tasks. The boat passes them slowly. One looks up and nods. The workers remain behind after the last waiting boat has passed. Their day is not defined by the few minutes in which travellers see them. A gate must be observed when traffic is light as well as when traffic gathers. A bank repaired in one season must be checked in the next. Timber responds to moisture. Stonework responds to pressure. Earth settles. Reeds and debris collect where water slows. Along another reach, a dredging boat or a group of workers may be seen clearing accumulated material from the channel. The work is repetitive but precise. Sediment removed from one place is placed where it will not simply slide back into the route. The depth needed by a small local boat may not be enough for a heavily loaded vessel. A canal that looks broad from shore can still contain difficult edges beneath the surface. Towpaths also belong to the hydraulic landscape, though they are less visually impressive than gates. Their surfaces need to remain passable. Where a path narrows beneath a bridge, people and animals pulling boats need room to continue safely. Where a bank erodes, the path may need strengthening. A traveller aboard sees only a line running beside the water, but that line is part of the canal's working design. Bridges demand their own kind of compromise. They must connect neighbourhoods and roads above the water while allowing boats to pass below. An arch too low, a landing too crowded, or an approach too narrow changes the choreography of traffic. Boat crews learn which bridges invite caution, which bends conceal an approaching vessel, and which landings are easiest to reach when the wind shifts. These pieces form a quiet system of memory. Knowledge is stored partly in documents and official instructions, but also in habit. A worker knows where a bank usually softens after rain. A boatman knows where to give another vessel extra room. A gatekeeper knows how the surface behaves before a level is fully settled. The canal is engineered through structures. but it is operated through attention. By late afternoon, the gate is behind us. The water resumes its gentler sound along the hull. The lesson of the managed stretch lingers, though the engineering itself recedes from view. The Grand Canal is not merely water contained between banks. It is a changing relationship between landscape and attention. We follow a long curve toward the north. The light begins to warm as the sun lowers behind the clouds. A cluster of larger warehouses appears in the distance. Boats rest along a wider quay. The faint sounds of a city reach across the water before its lanes come into view. By evening we're approaching Yangzhou, a place where the practical movement of goods and the cultivated pleasures of urban life once met with unusual richness. Yangzhou appears first as a change in the water. The canal widens near the working edge of the city. More hulls rest along the bank, some low and heavily loaded, others narrow enough to slip between the larger vessels. Mooring lines stretch toward posts darkened by use. Warehouses stand close to the quay with doors open to the fading light. Porters move between water and shore in steady lines, carrying the last loads of the day before the evening settles fully over the city. The sun is low enough that every reflection has softened. Amber light gathers on the canal, broken by the motion of boats. Roof tiles hold a warmer colour than they did at midday. Smoke from cooking fires drifts above the bank and thins into the cooling air. During the Ming and Qing periods, Yangzhou held national importance as the base of the Lianghua salt administration. Salt was ordinary in one sense, an essential part of food and daily life. Yet its production, regulation, and distribution also belonged to the larger fiscal world of Imperial China. The wealth associated with the salt trade helped shape the city. Merchants who prospered through it became patrons of arts and letters, and Yangzhou developed a cultural reputation alongside its commercial importance. From the canal, however, wealth is visible mainly through contrasts. At the quay, workers guide a boat into place with poles. A clerk stands beside a table under an overhang, reviewing a document before the light becomes too dim. Scales rest nearby. Containers are checked. A porter lowers his load, straightens his shoulders, and returns toward the warehouse. There is a rhythm to the final hour of work. Carry, set down, inspect, record, turn back, and begin again. Farther along, a smaller landing opens toward a lane where shops are closing. A paper merchant gathers loose sheets away from the damp air. A bookseller lifts a wooden shutter into place. A tea shop remains open, its interior made inviting by a few lamps and the outline of seated figures beyond the doorway. No one seems in a hurry to leave. Evening is not an abrupt ending. It is a gradual reduction in sound. Salt reminds us that the canal carried more than grain. UNESCO's account of the wider system describes the Huai'an tradition in connection with the storage and transport of grain, salt, iron, taxation, and control of traffic. The details changed across centuries, and not every boat belonged to an official shipment. Yet the canal repeatedly served as a space where government regulation, commercial opportunity, and ordinary labour met. A boat loaded with sealed containers rests beside the warehouse. Nearby, another carries baskets of produce intended for local sale. A passenger craft glides past both of them. The same surface accommodates different journeys without explaining each one. Our own boat finds a mooring place where the quay is quieter. The line is looped around a post. The hull settles against the edge. For the first time since morning, the sense of forward travel pauses almost completely. Tea is poured aboard while the city rearranges itself for night. Across the canal, a gate closes at the end of a warehouse lane. A lantern is hung beneath an awning. Someone sweeps the stone in front of a shop. The day's dust gathers in a small line and disappears into the shadows near the wall. A cook ladles broth into a bowl for a late customer. The smell reaches us faintly, mixed with tea and damp timber. Yangzhou's cultivated side lies slightly beyond the direct view of a working quay, but glimpses appear as we walk a short distance along the bank. Garden walls rise behind the busier lanes. Through an open doorway, a path bends toward rocks, bamboo, and water reflecting the last of the sky. The scene is partly concealed, which makes it feel more restful. The garden does not ask to be surveyed all at once. It offers fragments, a branch leaning over a wall, a tiled eave, the curve of a small bridge, a window framing leaves. In Qing times, the salt economy supported garden building in and around Yangzhou, including the landscapes associated with Slender West Lake. Wealthy merchants, officials, scholars, artisans and visitors all contributed in different ways to the city's cultural world. But tonight, we do not need to tour famous sites. It is enough to hear a faint note from a stringed instrument somewhere behind a wall, and imagine someone practicing in a room not visible from the water. The sound is brief. It stops. A few moments later, it begins again. A man steps out of the tea shop carrying a paper parcel. Two travellers talk quietly near the entrance of an inn. Their belongings rest beside them in compact bundles. A craftsman closes the front of his workshop but leaves a smaller lamp burning within. The city has many evenings occurring at once. The workers' evening, the merchants' evening, the travellers' evening, the cook's evening, the scholars' evening, the boatman's evening. Along the quay, cargo continues to move, though more slowly now. One warehouse door closes. Another remains open while a final count is completed. The clerk's brush moves across paper. The mark of administration is quieter than the weight of goods, but the two depend on one another. A sack or container is not simply lifted. It is measured, assigned, recorded, and sent onward through a chain of responsibility. The cultivated life associated with Yangzhou also appears through crafts that require patience rather than spectacle. In a lane beyond the quay, a worker closes the shutters of a lacquer workshop after setting several objects safely away from damp air. Farther along, a paper seller ties a bundle with string and places it above the floorboards. A craftsman carrying a small box pauses beneath a lantern to exchange a few words with the customer before continuing home. Patronage can sound distant when described only as wealth spent on art. In practice, it helps support painters, calligraphers, printers, performers, gardeners, builders, and craftspeople whose work entered the atmosphere of the city in different ways. Some work belonged to private gardens and merchant households. Some appeared in shops and tea houses. Some moved outward through the same transport networks that brought goods into Yangzhou. The city's salt wealth should not make us imagine that everyone on the quay shared equally in prosperity. Porters still lifted heavy loads. Boat crews still watched the weather. Shopkeepers still measured the evening against the amount of work left to finish. The contrast is part of the scene. Garden walls behind warehouses, music beyond the sound of ropes, fine paper sold near damp steps, and tea poured for both the traveller and the worker. The canal reflects more lamps as darkness deepens. Each light trembles separately until a passing boat draws them into long, wavering lines. For a few seconds the water seems filled with gold. Then the surface settles, and the lamps regain their smaller shapes. A boatman at the next mooring post repairs a line in the lamplight. He turns the fibres between his fingers, tests the knot and sets the rope aside. Someone aboard his vessel washes a bowl and pours the water away. A child, drowsy from the long day, is guided beneath the covered part of the deck. The cultivated pleasures of Yangzhou do not float above this working world. They are connected to it. The gardens, tea houses, crafts, books, paintings, and performances associated with the city's reputation grew in a place made prosperous partly through circulation, regulation, and exchange. The canal did not merely pass Yangzhou, it helped create the conditions in which the city's many layers could develop. The lamps brighten as the sky turns fully dark. We do not stay long enough to see the city fall asleep. There are still miles of water ahead and wider crossings beyond the next stretch. The rope is lifted from the post. The boat moves away from the quay at a pace so gradual that the city seems to release us reluctantly. Yangzhou recedes in reflections. The notes from the hidden instrument disappear first, then the voices from the tea shop, then the footsteps on the wharf. At last only the lamps remain, wavering behind us until a bend in the canal draws them out of sight. Ahead, the water routes approach the Yangtze and the more complicated landscape of junctions, crossings, storage, and hydraulic management that leads toward Huai'an. Morning arrives beneath a broad grey sky. The canal world feels different as we approach the Yangtze. The intimate scale of southern lanes and close-set bridges gives way to wider water and a more open horizon. The crew speaks a little more often. Lines are checked. Loose items are secured. The change is not alarming. It simply asks for attention. The larger Grand Canal network was useful precisely because it connected artificial waterways with major rivers and lakes. Those connections expanded the possibilities of movement, but they also made navigation a matter of local knowledge and careful timing. The canal was never sealed away from the natural landscape. It depended upon it, negotiated with it, and adapted to its changes. The Yangtze lies ahead like a wider field of moving grey. The opposite bank feels farther away than the banks we followed for days. Small birds wheel over the surface. A larger vessel crosses at a distance. Near the shore, several boats wait for their turn, their crews preparing in the ordinary manner of people who've done this before. Our boat joins them for a time. While we wait, breakfast is made. Steam rises from rice and tea. Someone checks the cargo coverings again, though they have not shifted. Another boatman looks toward the river and exchanges a few words with a person on shore. The knowledge required for a crossing often appears understated from the outside. It lives in the ability to read wind, current, traffic, and local instruction without making a display of expertise. When the time comes, the boat pushes away from the sheltered edge. The crossing is measured. The hull moves differently on the broader water. Small waves lift and release it. The canal boat that felt substantial within narrow banks now feels modest beneath the open sky. Yet nothing aboard changes its purpose. The sacks remain covered. The bowls rest where they were placed. The rope lies coiled near the bow. A crew member stands ready with the pole, though for now the deeper water gives it little use. The river birds pass overhead and disappear behind us. There is a calm concentration in a task performed without drama. The crew does not need to narrate each adjustment. The boat turns slightly. It holds its line. The nearer bank begins to recede, and the farther bank becomes gradually more distinct. Trees separate themselves from the grey distance. A landing emerges. Waiting boats gather near the mouth of the next waterway. By the time we return to more contained water, the crossing has already begun to feel like a memory. The canal receives us again with stone edges, reeds, mooring places, and the reassurance of a towpath running beside the bank. The northbound journey continues through an environment shaped by water management on a larger scale. Rivers, lakes, channels, dikes, gates, and storage facilities belong together here. The waterway is not merely a route drawn on a map. It is a working system in which natural and constructed features must cooperate closely enough for boats to continue. As we travel toward Huai'an, the landscape changes gradually. The lower Yangtze atmosphere does not disappear at once, but it grows less dominant. Some banks feel broader. Settlements appear at different intervals. The architecture near working landings becomes more utilitarian. Warehouses and administrative buildings gather around points where goods are handled, counted, stored, and redirected. Huai'an became closely associated with canal administration and hydraulic management. Its position near important waterways made it a natural place to understand the organizational side of transport. Boats did not simply move from south to north in one uninterrupted line. They waited, transferred cargo, took on supplies, responded to water conditions, and passed through places where the canal's physical and administrative systems became especially visible. Near an embankment, a line of boats rests in the angled light of late afternoon. Some are waiting for instructions. Others appear to have finished a stage of their journey. Smoke rises from cooking stoves aboard several vessels. The air smells of rice, river water, and damp wood. On shore, workers carry baskets toward a storehouse with thick doors and shaded interior space. We moor briefly to take on fresh water and ask about the next departure. The landing is broad enough for several people to pass without crowding. A clerk sits at a desk near the open front of a building. Behind him, shelves and stacked goods disappear into shadow. His brush moves across a register. Every few minutes someone arrives with a question, a document, or a measured quantity requiring acknowledgement. The scene is calm, but the amount of coordination behind it is substantial. A loaded boat must be balanced. Cargo must be protected from moisture. Granaries and warehouses must remain organized. A shipment expected at one point must be received and accounted for at another. Water levels and channel conditions must be monitored. Repairs cannot wait indefinitely. The entire system depends upon people doing many unremarkable tasks reliably. UNESCO's description of the canal heritage includes associated urban and hydraulic facilities, as well as the waterway itself. This is important. The history of the canal cannot be contained between its banks. It also lives in storehouses, dikes, weirs, bridges, offices, gates, paths, and the spaces where people prepare for the next stage of movement. A crew near us removes a woven covering from several sacks, checks the top layer and replaces it. Another boat takes on vegetables and fuel. A cook washes greens in a basin before adding them to a pot. Two men sit on the edge of a landing, eating from bowls and speaking in low voices. The waiting does not feel empty. It has its own work. Beyond the quay, a dike follows the water for a long distance. Its presence is easy to overlook because it appears simply as a raised bank, but such structures shape the route as surely as the canal channel itself. The water's calm surface is partly a consequence of boundaries maintained over time. As evening approaches near Huai'an, the boats along the embankment become individual floating households again. Administrative work may define the reason for stopping, but the hours beside the quay are filled with smaller concerns. A person shakes grain dust from a jacket before sitting down to eat. A crew member spreads a damp cloth where the last of the daylight can reach it. Someone purchases a bundle of fuel and places it near the stove. Another person walks toward the landing with a covered bowl for a relative working aboard a neighbouring boat. The water near the moorings is busy with reflections rather than movement. Storehouse walls, narrow lamps, ropes, posts, and the undersides of boats appear in fragments. Every so often, a hull shifts and the entire image breaks apart. Then the surface gathers itself again. A junction town teaches patience because movement cannot always happen at once. Some boats must wait for space. Others must wait for information or a suitable moment to proceed. A crew might use the pause to make a repair that would be inconvenient on open water. A traveller might ask where to find a meal, a bed, or a reliable connection onward. A clerk might finish a register while there is still enough light to read the lines clearly. The wait's productive even when the boat remains tied to shore. By the time the lamps are lit, several small tasks that accumulated during travel have been completed. A line is retied. A cracked container is set aside. Food is stored for morning. Directions are repeated until everyone aboard understands the next stretch. The next morning, departure comes under a veil of mist. Warehouse doors open one by one. A boat ahead of us pushes away from the shore. Our line is untied. The bow turns north. Before leaving, we notice one more feature of this northern approach, the relationship between river, lake, and canal. In the Huai region, water does not present itself as a single obedient channel. It spreads, converges, and changes character according to season and flow. Lakes and river courses can offer storage, access, and connection, while also requiring careful management. The useful route is maintained not by pretending the wider landscape is simple, but by working with its complexity. A boat waiting near the embankment carries poles longer than those used in quieter southern channels. Another crew studies the water before pushing away. A man standing near the landing describes the next stretch with gestures rather than a long explanation. A turn, a broader reach, a place to keep closer to the bank, another point where boats often wait. Instructions travel in practical fragments. The granary district has its own tempo throughout the day. In the morning, doors open and measurements begin. By noon, workers seek shade where they can eat. In late afternoon, the light reaches deeper into the storehouses, revealing rows that had remained hidden earlier. At dusk, coverings are checked, and records are gathered before moisture rises from the water. Administration is not separate from weather. Paper, grain, timber, and human energy all respond to the day. A small shrine or incense burner near a working space reminds us that practical life also contains private hopes. Travellers might ask quietly for safe passage, favourable conditions, or an uneventful return home. We do not need to assign one belief or ritual to every boatman. It is enough to remember that people carrying cargo through uncertain weather were not only units of labour. They had families, obligations, habits, worries, and ways of making a long route feel more manageable. Huai'an falls behind slowly, not as one landmark, but as a cluster of impressions. Grain dust visible in a shaft of light, a clerk bending over a register, a cook lifting the lid of a pot, ropes lying across a wharf, lanterns along an embankment, and the wide patience of water held within its route. As the banks drift past, the physical journey gives way for a while to a more inward question. What did it take to move grain across such a distance, season after season and century after century? Imagine a single sack of grain resting in the shade of a warehouse. It is not remarkable to look at. Its fabric is coarse. Dust clings to the lower edge. Someone has shifted it into place beside many others. Yet the sack belongs to a chain of actions that begins far from the storehouse and continues long after the boat carrying it disappears from view. In broad terms, Caoyun refers to the imperial transport of tribute grain. The system changed across dynasties, routes, and administrative reforms, so it should not be pictured as one unaltered machine operating in exactly the same manner for 1,000 years. Even so, the underlying need remained understandable. Northern capitals, officials, troops, and urban populations required dependable supplies. Productive southern and central regions could provide grain. The canal helped connect the two. UNESCO describes the Caoyun tradition as an imperial system involving the transport and storage of grain and strategic raw materials, along with taxation and control of traffic. Such language can sound abstract. To bring it closer, we can return to the sack. Before it reached a warehouse, grain was grown, harvested, dried, collected, and measured. Some portion entered systems of tax and official supply. It might pass through local hands, storage points, inspection, and transport arrangements before arriving at a canal landing. There, workers lifted it aboard a boat and placed it carefully among other sacks. The cargo needed to remain stable and reasonably dry. Records needed to follow the material itself. A clerk dips a brush and makes a mark on paper. The brush is light, the sack is heavy. The system needs both. Along the canal, official shipments shared the water with private commerce and local traffic. A grain fleet could not float through an empty corridor. Around it moved food sellers, repair workers, boat families, ferry passengers, merchants, farmers, innkeepers, craftspeople, and small traders carrying goods between nearby towns. The imperial route depended on local worlds that had their own reasons for living beside the water. Near a granary, the air is drier than it feels outside. Light enters through an open door and reveals dust moving slowly in the beam. Sacks are arranged in rows. Workers lift, carry, and lower them with practiced care. A scale beam settles into balance. A clerk checks a figure. Another person knots a covering securely. Measure, record, lift, carry, load, wait, move onward. The words repeat because the actions repeat, but each action belongs to a different pair of hands. On a boat, the grain becomes part of the vessel's physical character. It changes how low the hull sits in the water. It changes the space available for movement. It changes the attention paid to rain clouds, leaks, sharp turns, and the condition of ropes. A crew transporting sacks does not need to think in terms of imperial logistics every hour of the day. They need to think about the next bridge, the next gate, the next meal, the next safe place to moor, and the covering that must be tightened before rain. The grain also changes towns. Where cargo pauses, services gather, warehouses appear, porters find work, clerks need desks, paper, ink and food. Boat crews purchase vegetables, fuel, rope and tea. Inns serve travellers. Repair yards answer the slow wear of water and wood. A system created for supply becomes part of a wider economy along the banks. At the edge of one storehouse, a vendor serves bowls of hot food to workers finishing a shift. The meal is simple and warming. Steam rises into the angled light. A porter sets down his bowl whenever someone needs space to pass and lifts it again once the way is clear. The conversation is unhurried. Everyone understands the pace of the place. Farther along, an official inspection occupies a small landing. The people involved are neither theatrical nor severe. A measure is checked. A document is reviewed. A seal is noted. The work is procedural because procedure gives a large system some chance of consistency. Mistakes, delays, losses, corruption, and shortages certainly existed across the centuries. No network of this scale operated perfectly, but the persistence of the canal supply role tells us that enough people, often enough, perform their tasks well enough for movement to continue. It is useful to resist the idea that the canal carried only the needs of rulers. Grain moving toward a capital belonged to state planning, but the canal's daily life was broader. A family in a small boat might be transporting jars to a nearby market. A carpenter might send finished pieces to another town. A farmer might use a side channel for vegetables. A merchant might arrange cloth beneath a covering and worry about rain. A traveller might purchase a place aboard a vessel already going in the right direction. The official and the ordinary occupied the same water. Our boat leaves the storehouse district in the late afternoon. The cargo beneath our covering is modest, but after watching the granary work, even a small sack seems to contain a larger story. Grain is not only food. Along the Grand Canal, it is distance made manageable through labour. It is a field connected to a warehouse, a brush mark connected to a boat, a southern harvest connected to a northern kitchen. The landscape begins to open as we continue. The close, watery world of the south gradually gives way to longer banks and a broader sky. The towpath stretches farther before turning out of sight. Trees stand at greater intervals. The breeze feels cooler. The records close for the evening. The storehouses recede. Northward, the route rises toward Shandong, where maintaining navigation required another kind of patience, the careful management of water across higher and more demanding ground. The farther north we travel, the more room the sky seems to claim. The canal no longer slips constantly between white walls and close-set roofs. The banks stretch longer before a village interrupts them. Reeds stand in broad, rustling groups near the water. A towpath follows the edge in a pale line, sometimes empty for half a mile, sometimes occupied by a traveller walking at a steady pace with a bundle over one shoulder. The morning air feels cooler here. A blanket remains useful long after sunrise. The boat has been travelling for many days now. No single departure or arrival defines the rhythm. Progress is measured in quieter ways. A pot refilled at a new landing, a repaired rope growing familiar in the hand, a different shape of roof along the bank, a change in the food sold near a quay, a shift in the wind, a longer pause before the next gate opens. Shandong asks us to think again about the geography beneath the journey. When the Yuan dynasty established its capital at Dadu, present-day Beijing, the need for a more direct north-south supply route became especially important. Earlier canal routes did not form the same straight passage later travellers might imagine when tracing a line between Hangzhou and Beijing. During the Yuan period, new connections helped shorten the journey toward the capital. Among them was the Huai'an Canal, which joined waterways through western Shandong and toward Linking. A map can make such work look simple, one line meeting another. From the deck, the difficulty becomes easier to sense. Water does not automatically travel where a boat needs it to go. Land rises and falls. Rain arrives unevenly. Rivers carry sediment. Channels lose depth. The summit region in Shandong required sustained attention because boats needed enough water to cross comparatively high ground before descending toward other parts of the route. The canal ahead is calm, almost motionless. A gate holds water within a managed stretch. Beyond the bank, low hills interrupt the horizon. Their height is modest, yet after days among flatter waterways they seem to alter the entire mood of the landscape. The boat slows and joins two others waiting near the side. Someone pours tea, Another crew member steps ashore and walks a short distance along the embankment to speak with a gatekeeper. The conversation is practical and brief. We wait beneath an open sky where the sound of insects in the grasses is clearer than the voices from the bank. Water management in Shandong became especially sophisticated over time. In the Ming period, the Nanwang water diversion hub helped regulate the difficult summit section of the canal. Historical accounts associate the project with Song Li, a Ming official, and the advice of Bai Ying, a local water management expert. Work beginning in the early 15th century drew water toward the canal and distributed it in ways intended to support navigation in both directions. Dams, sluices, feeder channels, reservoirs, embankments, and local knowledge work together. It is not necessary to imagine the full system all at once. The scale becomes easier to understand through one gate. The timbers before us are weathered. Water presses against them with a low, continuous sound. A worker checks an edge where debris has collected. Another looks toward the waterline marked against stone. When the gate shifts, the surface changes slowly. A current appears where the water had seemed still. Leaves turn in small circles. The boat ropes tighten, then relax as the hull adjusts. A waterway across higher ground requires not merely construction but judgment. Too little water and heavily loaded boats cannot pass safely. Too much released in the wrong direction, and another section may suffer. The canal's practical intelligence lies partly in timing: hold, divert, release, observe, adjust. Even the most impressive hydraulic system remains dependent on people paying attention. When our turn comes, the boat moves forward between banks reinforced by generations of work. Stone appears in some places. Compacted earth forms longer edges. Grasses grow where the slope has softened over time. The marks of maintenance do not reduce the sense of age. They reveal it. Beyond the gate, the channel narrows slightly and then opens again into a long, quiet reach. The crew resumes its usual pattern. One person watches the bow, another checks the covering over the cargo. The kettle is set back near the stove. The waiting has altered the day only by making the next movement feel more deliberate. Villages are spaced farther apart in this stretch. When one appears, its smoke is visible before its roofs. A few homes gather near a landing. A cart stands beside the towpath. Bundles of reeds lean against a wall. A person sits in the sunlight mending something too small for us to identify from the water. No one comes to the shore as we pass. The village continues within its own quiet scale. At midday the breeze strengthens. It carries less of the lush, damp warmth of Jiangnan. The smell is drier. Reeds, earth, straw, and cooking smoke. The water reflects a paler sky. A bird rises from the grasses, circles once, and settles again farther along the bank. The northern route makes us aware of distance. In Suzhou, each bridge replaced the one behind it before the mind had time to wander far. Here, a towpath can remain in view for a long time. A figure walking along it seems to accompany the boat almost without moving. The space between settlements allows thought to lengthen. The canal still carries traffic, though it arrives at wider intervals. A covered grain boat passes slowly in the opposite direction. Its hull rides differently from ours under a heavier load. Several people stand aboard, their clothing stirred by the wind. One raises a hand in greeting. The boats move apart and the open water closes behind them. Later, we stop near a modest station where a cluster of boats has gathered for the night. The bank offers a sheltered mooring place. Lines are drawn tight against posts. Food is prepared aboard each vessel. The separate scents of rice, broth, vegetables and smoke blend in the cold evening air. Voices remain low. Everyone seems to understand that rest is another part of travel. A bowl warms the hands. The sky fades from pale blue to grey, then deepens toward darkness. Across the canal, low grasses sway in the wind. A gatehouse farther along becomes a small silhouette. One lamp appears near its doorway. The night stop is not our deepest rest yet. There are still conversations near the bank and the occasional sound of tools being put away. But the pause makes the weeks of travel tangible. The canal is not a ribbon passed over in a single dream. It is a sequence of days shaped by water, weather, waiting, meals, and the slow accumulation of miles. Before dawn, someone wakes to stir the embers and heat water. The air is cold enough that breath briefly shows in the lantern light. Bedding is folded. A line is loosened. The boat pushes away while the other vessels remain moored in darkness. The sky lightens gradually over the Shandong landscape. Low hills become visible again. The towpath reappears. Water held carefully within the route reflects the first colour of morning. By the time the sun reaches the bank, traffic begins to gather more frequently. A cluster of boats approaches from the north. Farther ahead, roofs rise around a larger landing. The open summit country is giving way to the next pattern of canal life. Towns where travellers, merchants, officials, repair workers and boat crews meet because the water has brought them to the same place. Before the open landscape gives way fully to market traffic, the boat crosses another long-managed reach. Here, the canal seems almost suspended between the banks. Water held for navigation has a still quality, different from the more obvious flow of a natural river. The surface mirrors the sky until a pole breaks the reflection and leaves a widening ring behind. The summit section encourages humility. Its operation could not depend on one dam, one gate, or one official decision alone. The Nanwang hub is remembered because its design coordinated a difficult water problem with unusual skill, but even an effective design required later care. Feeder channels needed clearing, sluices needed attention, reservoirs and embankments needed observation. People needed to decide how water should be distributed in response to actual conditions, rather than a perfect plan imagined once and never revised. Historical engineering often becomes more impressive when viewed without exaggeration. The value of the canal does not depend on claiming that every difficulty was solved forever. It lies in the repeated willingness to solve problems again. A route across variable terrain remains open because knowledge is renewed through practice. The crew aboard our boat understands this in a simple way. After waiting at the gate, one person marks the delay in memory rather than on paper. Another looks at the sky and judges whether the next mooring place can be reached before dark. The water has been managed, but the journey still requires decisions. Linking lies ahead, and beyond it the waterways leading toward Tianjin and the final northern approach. A canal town announces itself through small necessities. Before the larger buildings appear, we pass a yard where timber is stacked for repair. Then comes a workshop with metal tools hanging near the doorway. A line of rope coils rests beneath an awning. A food stall stands where the towpath widens near a landing, its pot already steaming in the cool morning air. Each place offers something a traveller may need before moving on. Linking grew important at a meeting point of waterways. Along the Huai'an Canal, it belonged to the northbound route shaped and strengthened over successive dynasties. Boats arriving here might carry grain, commercial goods, passengers, or local cargo. Some crews paused only briefly. Others waited for inspection, transshipment, repair, favourable conditions, or the practical completion of paperwork. The bank is busier than it has been for several days, but the activity remains readable. Workers do not rush without direction. Each person seems to have a limited space and a clear task. A boat is pulled closer to the landing, a basket changes hands, a cart is turned carefully on the path, a clerk receives a document, a cook wipes the rim of a bowl and ladles soup into it for a customer standing near the steam. Customs and tax facilities formed part of the regulated traffic along sections of the Grand Canal. At important points, movement could be counted, inspected, and recorded. Yet from the perspective of a traveller, administration appears beside many other needs. A crew must also replace a frayed rope, purchase vegetables, patch a covering, sharpen a tool, wash clothes, ask about the route ahead, and find a place to eat before evening. We moor near a repair yard where the repeated knock of a mallet carries over the water. A boat has been drawn close to shore for attention to its hull. Workers move around it with the calm efficiency of people accustomed to wood altered by water. One examines a seam. Another sorts materials on a low bench. The sound is neither loud nor constant. It comes in short, careful bursts. Our own repair is smaller. A metal fitting is checked. A replacement length of line is purchased from a seller whose goods hang in loops beneath the roof of a narrow stall. The rope smells of fibre and dry storage. It is rougher and paler than the older liner board, which has darkened from use. While we wait, the market provides a quiet lesson in exchange. Foods differ slightly from those found farther south. The weather encourages warmer bowls and thicker clothing. Speech reaches the ear with unfamiliar inflections. A traveller carrying a bundle asks a question and receives directions from someone who gestures toward a bridge upstream. A merchant looks over a stack of goods brought from another region. A boatman studies the sky before ordering tea. The canal carries accents as surely as it carries sacks. It also carries stories, though most leave no written record. A person returning south after months away brings news of a distant town. A craftsperson learns that a particular material is easier to obtain in another market. A cook notices what boat crews ask for on colder evenings. A repair worker sees the same problem appear on vessels built in slightly different ways. A family aboard a boat hears songs, prayers, jokes, and rumours from places they may never visit on land. The waterway is an exchange of habits as much as goods. By afternoon, our boat continues beyond linking. The route stretches through more northern country, toward waterways associated with Tianjin and the Hai River Basin. Tianjin's location near the meeting of canal and river routes gave it an important place in northern transport and exchange. Over long periods, its role developed in relation to waterways connecting inland traffic with wider routes toward the coast. The approach has a different texture from the southern canal towns. The air feels more open and more sharply defined. The breeze moves across the water without encountering as many close-set walls. Boats gather near points where cargo can be shifted, stored, sold, or sent onward. Some vessels show the wear of long travel. Sails are patched. Wood is darkened along the waterline. Lines have been repaired more than once. At a quay, we see evidence of transshipment. Goods arranged near the bank while decisions are made about the next vessel or route. A crate is lifted with care. A sack is set down and counted. A bundle of reed mats lies beside jars secured in straw. Smaller craft move between larger boats and shore. Nothing in the scene feels separate from daily life. A vendor carries a kettle between customers. A child runs several steps along the bank, slows near a rope, and is called back by an adult. A dog sleeps beneath a cart. A blacksmith's work sends a faint ringing sound from a lane behind the quay. Between the busier landings there are quieter spaces where travellers wait without needing anything immediately. A bench beneath an awning faces the water. Several men sit there with tea, speaking at intervals and then allowing silence to return. A woman folds cloth beside a doorway while listening to a conversation from inside. A repair worker files the edge of a tool, tests it with one thumb and places it back on the bench. Some merchants travelling through large Qing-era market centres relied on associations formed around place of origin, trade, or shared connections. Such institutions took different forms and should not be imagined as identical in every town. Still, the broader point is useful. A long-distance commercial world needs trust, information, lodging, introductions, and familiar contacts as much as it needs boats. A traveller arriving from far away may look for someone who speaks in a familiar way, knows a reliable inn, or can explain conditions along the next stretch. At the canal's edge, these networks remain mostly invisible. What we see is a greeting exchanged after recognition, a parcel placed safely inside a shop, a person directed toward a courtyard behind the lane, and a conversation that continues over tea after the market has begun to close. By evening the market narrows into lamps and steam. The wind has cooled. Boat crews tighten lines against the posts and add an extra layer of clothing. A soup stall remains open near the water. Its pot simmers steadily while customers eat in the shelter of an awning. The surface of the canal is darker here, and each lamp becomes a trembling line that breaks whenever a hull shifts at its mooring. We walk a short way along the quay. An inn door opens and releases a rectangle of warm light onto the lane. Travellers step around one another with compact bundles. A merchant completes a conversation near a shop already half closed. Someone carries a bowl toward a seated elder. In a small repair yard, tools have been gathered but not yet put away. The northern towns remind us that the Grand Canal is not one culture repeated from end to end. A long route crosses regions with their own landscapes, foods, building traditions, climates, and speech. The canal links them without erasing their differences. A boat crew moving north learns to adjust expectations. What can be purchased, how cold the night may become, where the best mooring places lie, which sections require waiting, and what information to ask for before departure. When darkness settles fully, we return to the boat. The new rope is placed where it can be reached. The stove is allowed to cool. A bowl is rinsed. The market voices diminish one by one. A final customer leaves the soup stall. The vendor lifts the pot from the heat. An awning is lowered. Across the water, lamps go out along the quay until only a few remain. Beyond the northern market lights, the canal grows quieter again. The next stretch leads toward Hangzhou. Before reaching it, we will spend one deep, unhurried night on the water, letting the working world recede into darkness and the canal become almost entirely sound. The last market lamps remain visible for a while after the quay has fallen behind. At first they form a loose row along the dark bank, each one separated from the next by stretches of shadow. Then the canal curves. The lights draw closer together in the distance, tremble once across the surface, and disappear behind the reeds. The water ahead is almost black. Our boat continues only far enough to reach a familiar mooring place along a sheltered bank. The crew knows the stretch. A post stands near the towpath. worn smooth where many lines have circled it over the years. The bow turns gently toward shore. A pole touches the bottom with a soft scrape. The new rope purchased earlier in the day is passed around the post, pulled taut and knotted with the quick confidence of a practised hand. The boat settles. For several minutes, ordinary evening tasks continue. Cargo coverings are checked and drawn securely into place. A bowl is washed and turned upside down to dry. A small amount of water is warmed. Tools are gathered from the deck and placed beneath the shelter. One person examines the line at the stern, then rests a hand on the knot as though confirming something already known. The movements are quiet enough that the smallest sounds become clear. A lid touches the rim of a pot. A jacket sleeve brushes against woven matting. Water taps the hull, pauses and taps again. Somewhere on the opposite bank an animal moves through dry grass and is still. There is no need for a lamp to burn brightly. A low flame is enough. Beyond the boat the canal remains a working route. Even at night, it never becomes completely silent. A late vessel passes at a distance, announced first by the faint knock of a pole and then by a soft voice carried across the water. Its lantern moves through the darkness like a small floating star. For a moment, light touches the edge of our deck. Then the boat continues north, and the darkness closes gently behind it. The towpath is empty again. It is easy to imagine that travellers have rested beside this water in many different centuries, though their experiences would never have been identical. A boatman of one dynasty might have known a route altered by later repairs. A merchant travelling south might have worried about a cargo entirely unlike the grain stored in an official warehouse. A family living aboard a smaller vessel might have arranged its sleeping space differently from a hired crew carrying goods between towns. Weather, season, region, social position, and luck all mattered. Still, certain evening actions must have felt familiar in broad outline. A line is secured, a covering is checked, a bowl is washed, a lamp is lowered. Bedding is unfolded where the day's work has ended. Voices soften because there is nothing left to arrange before morning. The canal invites a different understanding of rest. On land, a room stays where it is while the traveller moves through it. On a boat, the room itself has travelled all day. The same planks that held baskets and ropes beneath the afternoon sun now hold folded blankets in darkness. The boat is both vehicle and shelter, workplace and small domestic world. A thin moon appears between clouds. Its reflection does not form a perfect path across the water. It breaks into fragments with each ripple, gathers again, and breaks once more. Reeds shift in the breeze, their shadows brush the surface and vanish. The night air is cooler than it was in the south. A blanket is drawn more closely around the shoulders. Tea has lost some of its heat, but the cup still feels warm between the hands. No one speaks for a while. From farther down the towpath comes the sound of footsteps. They approach slowly, accompanied by the light tap of a staff or tool against the ground. A watchman or late traveller passes beyond the reeds. His lantern appears between the stems, disappears, appears again, and continues along the bank without stopping. The footsteps fade until they can no longer be separated from the soft movement of water. The canal holds darkness differently from a road. On a road, the unseen distance lies ahead. On the canal, darkness lies ahead, behind and beneath. The boat rests on it lightly. The water continues moving in ways too subtle to see, carrying reflected moonlight, leaves, and the small shifting shadows of grasses at the bank. Inside the covered part of the boat, The day's objects remain within reach. The purchased rope lies coiled beside older line. A basket is tucked beneath a shelf. A pot has cooled near the stove. A jacket hangs from a wooden peg. None of it asks for attention now. The mind can release the route for a while. There is no need to count the miles travelled from Hangzhou. No need to anticipate every gate, bridge, market, crossing or warehouse still ahead. Tongzhou will arrive when the boat reaches it. For now, the journey has narrowed to the space between one ripple and the next. A second boat passes much later, closer to the bank. Its crew keeps voices low. A pole touches the canal bed, lifts, and releases a brief line of droplets. The lantern aboard is shielded from the wind. Under its light, the hull appears for only a moment. Dark wood, a covered shape of cargo, the outline of someone standing near the stern. Then the vessel slips onward. Its wake reaches us after it has passed. Our boat moves once against the mooring line and settles again. The sound becomes almost rhythmic. Water against wood, a faint creak, a pause, water against wood again. Sleep on a canal boat would not mean perfect stillness. The body learns the slight motion. The ears learn which sounds belong to the ordinary life of the vessel. A rope drawing against a post, a board responding to a shift in weight, a cup placed carefully on a surface, a breeze moving woven coverings. These sounds do not interrupt the night. They define its safety. Clouds cross the moon and leave the canal darker for a time. The bank becomes a single shape. The reeds disappear. The nearest post remains visible only because the rope leads toward it from the bow. The hours pass without event. Far away, a call rises briefly along the water and receives a distant reply. The voices do not carry words clearly enough to understand. They are only reminders that others are awake somewhere beyond the curve of the bank. Then the route returns to quiet. Before dawn, the air changes almost imperceptibly. The darkness remains, but it loses its depth. A narrow edge of sky begins to separate from the land. The outlines of reeds return. The moon fades into a paler colour. Someone aboard stirs beneath a blanket. The low lamp is adjusted. Water is warmed. The first tea of the morning is poured while the canal still belongs mostly to night. The rope is loosened from the mooring post. For a moment it trails in a dark curve above the water before being drawn aboard and coiled. The pole touches bottom. The boat shifts away from shore. There's no sudden beginning to the day. The canal simply resumes its movement beneath us. Ahead lies the last stage of the northbound journey. We're not travelling directly into the palaces and crowded avenues of Beijing. We're moving toward Tongzhou, the practical terminal east of the capital, where grain and other goods arrive through the patient work of water and then continued onward through new hands. The first signs of Tongzhou arrive before the town itself. Traffic becomes more frequent in the pale morning light. A boat approaches from ahead carrying covered cargo and rides low enough that its reflection seems almost attached to the hull. A narrower craft follows close to the bank. On the towpath, the cart moves toward a landing with a steady wooden rattle. The air smells faintly of smoke, damp rope and breakfast cooking. The sky brightens slowly behind a veil of cloud. We pass a cluster of moored vessels, then another. Storehouses appear beyond the bank. At first they're separated by open spaces and smaller buildings. Farther on they gather more closely around the water. Doors open toward the quay. Ramps descend to landings. Lines run from boats to posts in a web of practical geometry. Tongzhou stood east of Beijing as an important canal terminal. The waterways reaching the capital region made it possible for grain and other goods to arrive through organized transport, storage, unloading, and onward distribution. Hangzhou was not simply the end of a journey. It was a point of transformation. A cargo that had moved for weeks by boat could enter another stage of handling, into warehouses, onto carts, aboard smaller vessels, through inspections, and toward the needs of the capital nearby. The presence of Beijing is felt without being directly seen. Somewhere beyond the morning haze lies the Imperial city with its walls, gates, officials, soldiers, craftspeople, servants, market sellers, households, kitchens, temples, workshops, and countless daily requirements. Yet from the quay, the capital is not a grand image on the horizon. It is a reason for ordinary work. A rope is thrown from a boat. A worker catches it, wraps it around a post, and pulls until the hull rests close enough to unload. A plank is placed between deck and landing. Another person checks that it sits securely. Then sacks begin to move. Each sack is lifted with care. The worker takes several steps, reaches the bank, and passes the load onward. The process does not look theatrical because it is not. It is repeated until the boat sits differently in the water. Its hull rises slightly as weight leaves the deck. Our own vessel joins a line waiting for space along the quay. There is more activity here than at any point since leaving Hangzhou, but the busyness has a steady order. Boats arrive, boats depart. Porters carry loads. Clerks sit at tables beneath awnings. Vendors move where the traffic allows. Tea is poured into bowls for workers beginning a long day. The journey's end has many sounds. Rope against wood, sandals on planks, wheels on packed earth, sacks lowered onto boards, a scale beam shifting, a brush moving across paper, a vendor calling softly to passing customers, the brief creak of a warehouse door opened wider. While we wait, the canal reflects the pale facades of storehouses and the darker forms of moored hulls. The surface is more disturbed here than on the northern night stretch. Ripples overlap, reflections stretch, break, and reform between boats. Yet the water still carries a familiar rhythm beneath the activity. A clerk reviews a document at a table close to the landing. His tools are modest: paper, brush, ink, perhaps seals and measures associated with the work. People approach one at a time. A question is answered. A figure is noted. A shipment is acknowledged. The bureaucratic life of the canal does not require a palace. It can occupy a shaded desk beside a warehouse door. Nearby, a cook serves porridge from a large pot. The bowl is warming and plain. Porters eat quickly enough to return to work, but not so quickly that the meal becomes a burden. Steam rises into the cool air. A boatman cups both hands around tea and watches the line of vessels shift along the quay. Eventually, space opens for us. The boat turns gently toward the landing. The crew has performed this maneuver many times in smaller places, yet the final approach feels subtly different. A line is prepared. The bow draws near. Someone on shore steps forward. The rope travels through the morning air and lands within reach. A few practiced movements bring the hull alongside the quay. For a moment the journey pauses in full daylight. The planks beneath our feet bear the marks of travel. Damp areas dried and darkened again. Small scratches, worn places, traces of dust, a repaired edge. The baskets and sacks arranged at departure have shifted from one part of the route to another. Some goods remain aboard for another destination. Others are ready to leave the boat here. Unloading begins without ceremony. A basket is passed ashore. Jars are handled carefully. Cloth bundles are kept away from damp surfaces. A sack is lifted, carried across the plank, and placed where someone else can record or redirect it. The boat grows emptier. The spaces concealed beneath cargo return to view. A journey by canal teaches that arrival is rarely an absolute ending. The basket carried ashore may go to a market. The grain sack may enter a warehouse. The jar may be placed on a cart. A clerk's notation may send one load toward storage and another toward onward transport. The boat itself may take on new cargo before returning south or entering a different stage of work. Hangzhou reveals the capital's dependence on invisible chains of effort. Beijing could be imagined as a place of court ritual and monumental architecture, but its daily life also relied upon food, fuel, materials, records, transport, maintenance, and labour. The canal brought the scale of those needs into contact with the scale of individual hands. A porter adjusts the cloth at his shoulder before lifting another sack. A warehouse worker sweeps grain dust away from a doorway. A clerk pauses to warm his fingers around a tea bowl. A cart driver checks a strap and waits for a load. A boatman sits briefly on the edge of a deck while someone else reties a line. The capital remains beyond the scene, implied in each task. We walk along the quay after the first unloading is complete. From shore, the variety of boats becomes clearer. Some are compact and practical, built for shorter movement. Others are larger, carrying the marks of longer routes. Some have shelters arranged for people who spend much of their lives aboard. Others devote nearly every available space to cargo. Ropes, poles, mats, baskets, coverings, and cooking pots repeat from vessel to vessel in different combinations. At one landing, smaller boats are being prepared for onward movement through nearby waterways. At another, carts wait to take goods along roads. A warehouse door stands open to a dim interior where rows of sacks disappear into shadow. The storehouse is cool and dry compared with the quay. Dust hangs in the air where morning light enters. The scene brings us back to the single sack imagined earlier near Huai'an. Its journey may have begun in a field far to the south. It passed through measurement, storage, lifting, transport, waiting, gates, weather, inspection, meals eaten beside it, repairs made near it, and nights when it rested beneath a woven covering while water moved against the hull. Here, it becomes part of a new arrangement. It is counted, stacked, and eventually moved again. Not every cargo follows the same path. Not every boat arrives from Hangzhou. Not every person on the quay understands the full network, yet each participates in a portion of it. By mid-morning, Hangzhou is fully awake. The pale quiet of arrival has become a steady working day. Sunlight begins to touch the upper edges of the storehouses. Shadows shorten beneath awnings. More customers gather near the food stalls. A repair worker carries a length of timber toward a boat waiting farther downstream. Near the edge of the terminal, a line of smaller carriers waits to receive loads suited to shorter onward journeys. Their decks are arranged differently from the boats that have travelled the full canal route. A few leave room for passengers. Others are prepared for compact cargo that can be transferred quickly. The change in scale is a reminder that transportation systems rarely rely on one vessel from beginning to end. A warehouse worker steps into the sunlight and calls for space to be cleared near a ramp. Two people move a stack of baskets aside. A cart backs carefully toward the loading area. The driver speaks quietly to the workers guiding the wheels. Once the cart is positioned, the next sequence begins. Lift, carry, settle, secure, and check. A woman selling tea walks between the waiting crews with a kettle and nested bowls. She paused for a boatman whose journey may have started only that morning, and then for another whose clothing and tired posture suggest a much longer route. For a few moments, both stand at the same landing, drinking the same warm tea while cargo passes behind them. Hangzhou brings distance into contact. Southern grain, northern carts, local vendors, official records, river knowledge, and the needs of Beijing meet within a few yards of water and stone. The terminal does not erase the miles behind each arrival. It gathers them briefly before sending goods and people onward. Our own crew completes the immediate tasks and sits for tea. There is relief in the pause, but no triumph. The canal journey has been too gradual for a sudden celebration. The boat did not conquer distance. It crossed distance by accepting it, one manageable stretch at a time. We look back along the water. The quay extends toward a bend crowded with hulls and lines. Beyond that bend lie the northern markets, the open Shandong reaches, the managed summit waters, Huai'an storehouses and waterworks, the wider Yangtze crossing, Yangzhou's evening reflections, Suzhou's bridge shadows, the fields and villages of Jiangnan, and the southern mist near Hangzhou, where the lantern dimmed before dawn. No single glance can contain the route. The canal exists partly because it exceeds the view. A cart moves away from the warehouse with a soft wooden rumble. Smaller boats adjust their lines. Someone calls from a landing. A tea bowl is refilled. The cargo continues toward the capital. Before leaving the terminal, we remain long enough to watch a departing boat begin the reverse movement. Its crew has unloaded part of one cargo and arranged another beneath fresh coverings. A vendor passes a parcel aboard. A boatman checks the position of a pole and nudges a basket away from the edge. The line is untied from the post, gathered into a coil, and placed near the bow. The southbound journey begins with no more ceremony than our own arrival. The hull moves away from the landing and joins the flow of traffic. For a few moments, it passes close enough that we can see the different colours of repaired wood along its side. Then it turns downstream and becomes part of the canal again. This is another reason Hangzhou feels less like a final destination than a hinge. Movement reaches it and changes direction. Grain arrives and is stored. Goods are transferred. Empty space aboard one vessel becomes useful space for another load. A worker who has spent the morning unloading may spend the afternoon preparing for departure. A clerk closes one entry and opens the next. A cart leaves for the city while a boat returns toward the south. The terminal is busy because it contains beginnings and endings at the same time. For us, it is time to step back from the busy quay and allow the longer memory of the canal to gather around the journey we have completed. A little farther from the busiest landing, the noise of Hangzhou becomes less distinct. The quay is still visible behind us. Porters continue to move between boats and storehouses. Carts continue to arrive and leave. The morning remains active, but distance softens its edges. A rope drawn across a post no longer sounds sharp. The closing of a warehouse door becomes a muted thud. Voices blend into a low murmur that belongs more to the water than to any one speaker. We follow the bank until there is room to pause beneath a willow. From here, the canal appears ordinary again. The water carries ripples away from the terminal. A small craft moves past with a single person aboard. Farther out, another boat turns slowly and begins a southbound journey. The Grand Canal has always exceeded any one route a traveller could follow. Our imagined voyage began near Hangzhou and moved north through a landscape shaped mainly by late Imperial canal life. Yet the system was broader than the path we traced, and its history was longer than the Ming and Qing atmosphere surrounding our boat. Some branches were active at one time and quieter at another. Some places rose in importance because a capital moved, a channel was redirected, a river changed course, or a new connection shortened the distance between regions. The waterway is best understood not as a monument fixed in place, but as a living arrangement repeatedly adapted to changing circumstances. The earliest channels belonged to a world before Imperial China had taken its later form. Regional states cut waterways in the centuries before unification, using them for communication, transport, and strategic movement. Those early works did not anticipate every later use. A person standing beside one of those channels in the 5th century BCE could not have imagined our full northbound journey toward Hangzhou. Yet the basic insight was already present. Water could connect spaces that roads reached only with greater difficulty. The Sui dynasty gave that insight a different scale in the 7th century CE. Its rulers pursued connections that brought existing waterways and new construction into a more unified network. The costs of large projects could be heavy for the people required to labour on them, and the Sui dynasty itself did not last long. Still, the canal links strengthened in that period outlived the court that ordered them. Later dynasties inherited not a finished object but a set of possibilities. The Tang and Song periods used, repaired and reshaped important parts of the canal world in relation to their own capitals, economies and patterns of trade. Cities grew where water routes gathered movement. Markets learned the timing of boats. Granaries accumulated near useful junctions. A bridge became more than a bridge when it connected a lane to a wharf used every morning. An inn mattered because travellers arrived tired at the same bend in the canal. A repair yard mattered because timber and rope wore down under the patient pressure of work. Under the Yuan dynasty, the north-south route changed again. Dadu, the capital later known as Beijing, required supply. New connections through Shandong helped create a more direct passage. The Grand Canal reached a major peak as a unified inland navigation network, extending across more than 2,000 kilometres of artificial waterways and linking 5 major river basins. A number of natural waterways and lakes belonged to the wider system as well. The result was not a perfectly straight channel, but a complex corridor in conversation with geography. Then, under the Ming and Qing dynasties, the route continued to support the movement of grain and other goods toward the north. The Huai'an system organized much of that supply through collection, storage, transport, regulation, and record-keeping. Hydraulic work such as the Nanwang water diversion hub responded to the practical challenge of keeping boats moving across the summit region in Shandong. Towns like Yangzhou drew wealth and cultural life from their positions within networks of regulated trade and transport. Linking and Hangzhou accumulated the services that traffic required. Along countless smaller stretches, rural households used the water for their own local needs. These periods cannot be folded into one picture without qualification. A bridge seen in a Qing-era town should not be treated as though it looked exactly the same in the Sui dynasty. A warehouse practice observed near Hangzhou may not describe every granary in every century. The route itself changed. Rivers moved, channels silted, sections were rebuilt, deepened, widened, redirected or replaced. Some waterways retained heavy traffic while others lost importance. Yet careful historical imagination does not become weaker when it acknowledges variation. It becomes more human. We can picture an old embankment repaired in stages because that is how useful infrastructure survives. We can picture boat crews asking local questions because no map replaces experience at the water's edge. We can picture people waiting beside a gate because the canal never existed only as an idea. It existed as a daily sequence of practical decisions. The water beside us carries the morning light downstream. A leaf turns slowly in a small eddy near the bank. From the terminal comes the faint rhythm of cargo still being moved. The longest histories often hide in repeated gestures. Consider the rope. At Hangzhou, a rope rested on damp planks before sunrise. In Jiangnan, a line drew taut between a loaded boat and a towpath. At a landing, frayed fibres were cut away and retied. In Linking, a new coil was purchased beneath an awning. On the North Canal, a rope secured the boat for a quiet night. In Hangzhou, lines linked hulls to posts while cargo entered its next stage of movement. The rope is not symbolic because someone intended it to be. It is symbolic because a working waterway requires connection. Boat to shore, cargo to deck, one task to another, a departure to an arrival. The same is true of the bowl. Rice porridge near Hangzhou, a midday meal beneath a tree in Jiangnan, tea during a wait beside a gate, broth on a Yangzhou quay, steam rising beside a Huai'an storehouse, soup beneath a northern awning, warm tea before dawn, porridge served to porters in Hangzhou. Food appears throughout the journey not to decorate the landscape, but because work takes place inside ordinary human bodies. Historical systems can look abstract when reduced to roots and quantities. Meals return them to scale. Someone must stop long enough to drink. Someone must warm their hands. Someone must wash the bowl and place it upside down to dry. And then there is the bridge. A bridge divides water and joins land. It allows one traveller to cross above while another passes beneath. In Hangzhou it appeared through mist. In Suzhou it shaped the rhythm of entire neighbourhoods. In smaller towns it connected a lane to a market or a home to a workshop. From the deck, the underside of a bridge is brief shade, a change in echo, and a frame through which the next section of water appears. Bridges also remind us that the canal was never separate from the places along it. A waterway can be drawn as a line on a map, but lived geography is made of crossings. People approach from fields, roads, alleys, courtyards, shops, and side channels. The main route receives them and lets them go again. Our journey has followed the canal northward, but every bank suggests other directions. A side channel near Hangzhou leads toward cultivated land. A Suzhou lane rises from a stone landing and disappears between walls. A road near Yangzhou carries a traveller away from the wharf. A dike near Huai'an continues beyond the point where the boat turns. A Shandong towpath stretches toward a village whose name we never learn. A Hangzhou cart leaves the storehouse and travels toward the capital. The canal connects places precisely because it is not the only route. Its importance lies in the way movements gather along it. Grain enters from fields. Salt arrives through regulated systems of production and distribution. Timber, cloth, ceramics, tools, fuel, food, paper, letters, news, and people pass between shore and boat. The waterway does not produce all these things. It gives them a path. At times, the path required extraordinary engineering. Dikes held water where it needed to remain. Weirs and sluices shaped flow. Gates and locks assisted navigation. Dredging restored depth. Feeder waters supported difficult stretches. Bridges crossed above. Storehouses and offices organized what the water carried. The canal's achievement is not a single invention standing alone. It is the cumulative intelligence of many adaptations. In 2014, UNESCO inscribed the Grand Canal on the World Heritage List, recognizing its ancient origins, vast scale, hydraulic engineering, Huai'an tradition, and role in cultural interchange. The modern designation belongs only briefly in our story, but it gives us a useful reminder. Heritage is not merely age. It is the survival of relationships that still help us understand how people lived, worked, travelled, organised resources, and adapted to landscape. The canal we have followed tonight is therefore both physical and remembered. Some historic sections continue to carry water and movement. Some associated structures survive in altered landscapes. Some routes can be traced more clearly through archaeology, documents, and preserved sites than through present-day navigation. Modern cities have grown. Technologies have changed. The waterway has never stopped changing simply because historians began looking back at it. Continuity does not mean sameness. That may be one of the most restful truths the canal offers. To endure is not to remain untouched. A useful waterway survives by accepting maintenance. A wooden gate is repaired. A stone edge is patched. Silt is cleared. A new route answers a new need. An old warehouse acquires a different purpose. A bank is strengthened after weather. The canal continues because people repeatedly attend to what time has altered. The same understanding can be found aboard the boat. Its planks are worn, but they remain useful. Its rope has been repaired. Its covering has been tightened against rain. Its cargo has changed. Its passengers have slept, awakened, eaten, worked, and stepped ashore. Nothing about the vessel suggests perfection. It has carried us precisely because it is cared for. A southbound boat passes the willow where we are standing. Its deck is less crowded than the vessels unloading nearby. A person near the stern lifts a pole and places it back into the water. Another sits beneath the covered area, arranging a few items for the day ahead. The boat turns around a bend, heading toward places that have become familiar to us in reverse order. Perhaps it will stop in a northern market town before night. Perhaps its crew will purchase soup beneath an awning. Perhaps it will wait in Shandong while water gathers behind a gate. Perhaps it will pass a Huai'an storehouse, cross the Yangtze beneath a grey sky, watch Yangzhou lamps stretch across the canal, hear workshop taps in Suzhou, and wake one morning among the soft green waterways near Hangzhou. Or perhaps it will travel only a short distance. The canal belongs equally to local journeys. We cannot know. The boat recedes until its passengers become silhouettes. Then the bend receives it. The terminal remains active behind us, but the day has settled into a gentler pace. Sunlight touches the old stones at the bank. The last lantern still visible beneath one warehouse awning is extinguished. Its smoke rises briefly and disappears. A large system has carried us across distance, but the final image is small. One boat leaving, one line of ripples widening behind it, one old bridge warming in the morning light, one current continuing beneath a quiet sky. The journey is complete now. There is nowhere else we need to go tonight. The boat rests once more beside the canal, away from the busiest part of the quay. Its cargo has been handled. The lines have been checked. The deck has been swept. A few objects remain where they have rested through much of the voyage. The tea bowl, the folded covering, the coil of rope, the small pot near the stove, the jacket placed within reach when the northern air grew cooler. The water touches the hull with a faint familiar sound. Looking back, the route does not return as a list of places. It returns as light and texture. The blue-grey mist before sunrise near Hangzhou, the first shutter opening above a waterside lane, the smell of tea and a rice porridge aboard the boat, willow leaves touching the surface in Jiangnan, a towpath appearing and disappearing beside cultivated fields, stone arches in Suzhou, with footsteps crossing above and workshop taps echoing between the walls. Cool shade beside a wooden gate while the water slowly changed level. Yangzhou lamps trembling across the canal after sunset. A broad grey river beneath an open sky. Dust floating in a shaft of light inside a Huai'an storehouse. A scale beam settling into balance. The longer banks of Shandong and the cold air before dawn. Soup warming beneath a northern awning. A thin moon broken into fragments on the North Canal. Warehouse doors opening in Hangzhou as another working day began. Each image passes quietly and makes room for the next. The Grand Canal is easy to describe in impressive terms. It was assembled across centuries. It connected important river basins. It carried grain and other goods across great distances. It supported capitals and towns. It required extensive hydraulic knowledge, maintenance, organisation and labour. But a restful journey brings us back to a simpler understanding. History is not held only in grand structures. It is also held in the hand that tightens a knot, in the person waiting patiently for a gate to open, in the clerk making one careful brush mark, in the porter pausing to warm his fingers around a bowl, in the cook lifting a lid and allowing steam into the evening air, in the traveller folding a blanket after a quiet night beside the water, in the repair worker setting one stone beside another because the bank must remain strong enough for the next boat. These tasks rarely announce themselves. Most are forgotten as soon as they are finished. Yet a waterway stretching across such distance could not exist without them. There is a comfort in allowing the history to remain incomplete. We have followed one imagined boat and noticed only what could be seen from its deck or reached during a short walk along the bank. Beyond each scene were rooms we did not enter, side channels we didn't follow, villages whose names we did not learn, and travellers carrying stories that passed us without explanation. A sleep journey does not need to gather every detail. It can leave some doors closed and some bridges beyond the next bend. The canal is large enough to continue without our attention. The canal continues beyond the edge of our story. Somewhere downstream, a boat is passing beneath a bridge. Somewhere upstream, a line is being pulled toward shore. Somewhere near a village, someone has stepped onto a landing with a basket. Somewhere in a storehouse, a door has closed and the dust has begun to settle. Somewhere along a quieter bank, a lamp has been turned low. Here, the boat is safely moored. The rope rests against the post. It holds without strain. The planks beneath you have cooled in the night air. The canal reflects only a little light now, enough to show the smallest movements on the surface. A breeze passes through the reeds and reaches the deck gently. There is no need to think about the route ahead. No need to follow the cargo farther toward the city. No need to count the bridges behind us. The water already knows how to continue. You can let the towpaths grow quiet. Let the warehouse doors close. Let the last footsteps fade along the bank. Let the lantern dim until its reflection becomes smaller and smaller on the dark water. The canal has carried boats through changing dynasties, changing seasons and changing landscapes. Tonight it has carried us through a long, gentle journey of mist, fields, bridges, gates, lamps, storehouses, open skies, and ordinary human work. Now the movement can become softer, water against wood. A pause, a cool breeze, the faintest creak of a rope, then stillness again. The boat is resting, the bank is quiet, the sky above the canal is deep and calm, and the long waterway will continue on beneath it, moving almost silently through the night. For now it is time to rest. Good night.
Thank you for watching Something About Sleep. since you're clearly still awake, why don't you click on the next video and we'll see you there.